The earliest known symbol of Christianity, by means of which the faith was anciently distinguished, was the sign of the fish. In ancient times, in those days of Roman persecution, when Christians met, they would take the tip of their staffs and they would make a drawing upon the sand or earth before them, a simple symbol of a fish. This was their method of recognition, and once having recognized each other, they then scattered the symbol with their foot, in order that it might not survive to be used against them at some future time. This symbol was derived from the concept of the calling of the apostles, in which Jesus declared that he would make them fishers of men. Up to the present time, the supreme symbol of the Roman pontiff is the fisherman's ring, the symbol, again, of the concept of the fisher of men. Now, this symbol is a little difficult, perhaps, for us to completely understand, but it represents, it seems to me, a very important basic concept, derived again from antiquity, and gradually Christianized over a period of time. This concept is archetypal. Man recognized the sea, the ocean, as a peculiar and tremendous archetypal symbol. When we realize that over half of the earth's surface is composed of sea and ocean, and that in the depths of it are mysteries far beyond our comprehension, that even today we have never explored it even to a fragment of the degree that we have explored the air. We realize that the ocean, or the sea, has a great and wonderful power. The surface of it moved by the waves and currents of time, breaking with storm, and yet this same ocean forming the ancient highway which bound nations together. For among the earliest of man's achievements were simple forms of navigation, by means of which he could use the sea as a road. He also derived his nutrition from the sea, and many peoples living along the shores of the sea depended upon fish for their survival. Not only the seas, but the lakes, the rivers, and the streams, therefore became highly symbolic. When it was that man first intuitively realized that he was born out of the sea, we do not know. But even modern science points definitely to the fact that the ocean was the original land of life, and that from the sea creatures crawled out upon the land, gradually becoming amphibious, and finally gaining an existence out of the ocean, but still dependent upon water, very largely for survival. This mystery of the sea was therefore the mystery of origin, and among most ancient peoples, the sea was the symbol of life. It was the symbol of archetype. It was the symbol of the great, unexplored depths in which all things existed. The sea also became the proper and natural emblem of vitality, of the life principle, of generation, and of germination. And the fish existing in the sea became, so to say, very much like man existing in the air. For as the fish is drowned in the air, so man can be drowned in the sea. The fish, therefore, lives in an element in which it has a natural subsistence. Man living also in an element of air in which he has a natural subsistence. But to the ancients, the sea became also a symbol of the air. It became a symbol of the pressure or the presence of an invisible environment in which all forms of life existed. Because all life came from the sea also became a symbol of universal life. It became a symbol of the universal energy in which all things had a common sharing. And among ancient peoples, the sea became an emblem of the tremendous field of spiritual energy within which all creatures lived and moved and had their being. And it also became the symbol of a dark mystery the mystery of the human unconscious, the mystery of the human subconscious. And today, in archetypal dreaming, the dream of the sea and of great storms, or of tidal waves, or of vast immersions in water, or of floods, or the sinking of continents under the sea, all of these have to do with mystery, with the unconscious root of life, with the vast archetypal ocean, into which all things seemingly are submerged, and from which in the dawn of things all things emerged to become life. Therefore the sea is the root of man's concept of existence. The sea is the very eternal cosmic all. And man lives not only surrounded by and permeated by this all, but when he goes inside of himself, he suddenly stands upon the shores of a great sea, a sea that is eternal and extends inwardly throughout the whole mystery of being. To the ancient Buddhists, this sea was the symbol of nirvana, or the end of existence. It was the mystery of the unknown cause of things, the mystery of the unknown end of things. And the ancient name for the sea was Mari. And the mother of Buddha was Mari, or Maya, a symbol of the oceans. The symbol of Mary, the name Mary, comes from the sea, from the great ocean of life, from the eternal mystery of the spiritual substance from which all things are immaculately conceived and born. Therefore the sea is the symbol of the eternal, life-giving power of the infinite. It is the symbol of the mysterious humidity in which all things are generated and have their own existence. And in this sea, there are these fish creatures, many of them strangely shaped and different from any creature upon the land. But to the ancients, in their symbolism of the great sea, the fishes became archetypal emblems. They represented the sperms of life. They represented the first manifestations of forms out of the infinite. Therefore, in man, they are also basic ideas existing forever in the sea of life. They are the great archetypes. They are the patterns that are first projected from the patternless. They live only in their own element. When they come forth out of that element into the air of mortal man, they die. Therefore, these creatures can never be completely brought out of their ocean, any more than man can dive into his own subconscious without drowning. Thus, each of these elements is strangely separate. Yet man lives along the shores of the sea and depends upon it for his life. And man also depends upon the air. So the air became the symbol of his outer life, and the sea of his inner life. And the individual, gazing toward the source of his own being, sees at best only the surface of a mighty ocean, the depths of which are beyond his comprehension and understanding. The ancients believed that visions and dreams were man moving out into this sea, that all of the changes in his psychic life were like storms moving the surface of his subconscious and unconscious parts. But beneath the surface of the storms, beneath the ocean, there was always quietude. There was inevitable and eternal calm. Yet also in this depth, there might be currents, waves, and methods of motion. There might be great rivers in the sea, and we now know that there are. That there might be lakes and rivulets and streams within the sea itself. Thus we are more or less equipped to recognize the possibility that in this sea of archetype, this sea of universal, there are courses and currents and motions, and these we term the movements of eternal law, which has its abode within the strange depths of the archetypal ocean. And on the surface, or near the surface, are the small fishes, those that we are able to see and upon which to a degree we depend for life. For we catch these fishes and they become our food. And we remember the words of St. Augustine, who declared that Christ was a fish, caught, taken out of the sea, cooked and eaten for our salvation. This is all archetypal symbolism. But it is also apparent that by these fish in the eternal ocean are the germs of life properly symbolized, that they represent the germs of our own consciousness, that man's consciousness is a fish in the sea of his unconscious, that man's consciousness lives in a different element from the material world in which his body subsides or exists, that when this body is cast into its own internal, it perishes. But when the internal is brought out of its own element, it likewise perishes. For there is a certain division, a certain differentiation. And when the fish is brought out of the sea, it dies. And yet in dying, it has a certain service to perform. Thus our dreams, our purposes, our principles, while we hold them in ourselves, have an eternal existence. Yet when we bring them out into manifestation and use them to build structures or to build patterns, these patterns are mortal and are subject to death. And it is our apparent conviction that with these mortal forms perishes the idea behind them. This is not true. The idea returns to the sea, but the patterns formed in themselves are perishable. Thus man has an existence in eternity, in the great sea of life. He also has an existence in time. And his existence in time is mutable, and is not permanent, but subject to eternal and everlasting change and modification. Thus the fish symbol became to these ancient peoples the proper emblem of the divine power of life. Also, the capturing of the fish in the nets became a symbol of man's mental, emotional, physical effort, by means of which he was able to capture ideas in the net of reason, how he was able to reach into himself and capture principles, and bringing them out, use them for the nourishment of his own life. Thus these fishes which are captured can be read in two ways. Either they represent mortality, humanity, the outer fish in the ocean of air, captured and held by the great fisherman. Or they may also represent man capturing out of his own inner life the germs of his own great action and conduct. If therefore Schubert tells us that he heard first the melodies that he composed in the air around him, if we discover that great inventions come from dreams and sleepings and from visions, then it would seem that man is a fisherman, fishing in the midst of his own unconscious life, drawing out from the sea of the subconscious the archetypal patterns that are there, causing them to become the instruments of his purpose. For actually his reality, his true life, his achievements are all real only to the degree that they are archetypal. Thus in ancient Christianity, the fish became the symbol of the divine archetype, the perfect pattern, that there are true principles ever available to man, and that by seeking within the depths of himself, he shall discover creatures that abide there, that have no place in his outer world, and that in these creatures he discovers a new kind of nutrition. He finds the life upon which he may feed and not again hunger. And in the same way, the waters of life, or the waters of eternity, are different from the waters of earth. For man drinking of the waters of earth shall thirst again, but those who drink of the living waters shall thirst no more. These living waters, the great ocean, the virgin sea, the great mother of mysteries, always this symbolism conveys the resources of man's internal life. It reveals to the individual the potential that is locked within himself, by the restoration of which he restores his ancient dignity and finds again the ever-flowing fountains of inspiration and courage. Another symbol that has been long and often associated with Christianity, particularly after about the 4th century, was the sign of the cross. This symbol, of course, like all others, has an ancient history, going back to ancient times. We associate it now largely with the crucifixion of Christ. But the cross has another broad and general meaning. The cross represents essentially cross purposes. It represents, and was known to the ancients, always as an emblem of conflict. It represented to the Egyptian, with certain modifications, the symbol of the inundation of the Nile. It was based upon what was called the Nilometer. And in this form, when a certain degree of water caused the Nile to rise, then these two pieces of wood formed a right angle, and this was the cross which became the symbol of life, because the inundation of the Nile was the symbol of life to the Egyptians. In the Roman and Grecian culture, however, the cross was the symbol of death. It was the symbol of punishment for the peculiar crimes of sedition against the state, of treason, and similar things. But from the oldest possible time, the cross was the symbol of a horizontal energy and a vertical energy, one passing through the other. It was therefore a symbol of God and nature. It was a symbol of heaven and earth, of spirit and matter, of consciousness and force. It was always the symbol, likewise, of the great cross of the year, the equinoxes and the solstices. And it was upon this great heavenly cross that the sun deity was crucified. It was the symbol of the primordial formation of bodies and form, for the first visible development of a human or other cell, recorded by science, is a cruciform, a split at the north polar extremity of the cell in the process of multiplication. Thus the cross was the symbol, essentially, of life moving into matter. It also, however, has another interesting meaning to us archetypally. It is the sign of plus. And in mathematics and other signs, it is the sign of addition. Something is added. The St. Andrew's cross is the symbol of multiplication, and this also gives us very definite symbolic meaning. But for our present purpose, the cross of Christendom always represents the crossing of lines of force, and also the symbol of something that is added, or an addition to something, or the power of things to be added to each other in some mysterious way. If we study the two symbols, we can understand something of this. Heaven plus earth, or heaven cross earth, was the basic formula for the generation of man. Therefore, man was the child of heaven and earth. Man was the creature in which heaven and earth were revealed. Spirit plus matter equals form. Therefore, out of the plus comes something important in each case. Spirit and body, or spirit plus body, equals soul. For soul must be a production of these two. Therefore, we say that this plus, male plus female, equal progeny. Always something is added. And this addition in the Christian mystery has something to do with the explanation for the experiences of life as we know them. For in our experience, we are sometimes tempted to wonder how it may be that any good thing shall come out of Nazareth, how this tremendous struggle that we have in life can ever produce value equal to its own emergencies, and how it is necessary for life to pass through this mystery of birth, death, and resurrection in order that the will of heaven be fulfilled in its creation. I think we begin to experience the problem when we realize that the union of these two opposites, separated by the plus sign and united by them, this union is an achievement by means of which an alchemy or a mystery is wrought within the archetype of man himself. Man is an inward being flowing out through an outward being. But we have forgotten that man must be fruitful. Today our tendency is to assume that our internal energies flowing outward through our activities may be simply dissipated, that they simply go on and vanish in thin air. The individual is using energy merely to perpetuate himself. He is using energy simply to achieve his own purpose. And that purpose may or may not have any similitude to divine purpose. Here he is making this mistake. Energy is not given to us merely to be wasted. There must be a product. There must be something attained. And in the spiritual life of man, this energy plus bodily existence equals experience. And experience is the mysterious transformation of theory into fact. Experience is the discovery of truth. It is also the recognition of error. Experience is that procedure by means of which all things in themselves theoretical are brought into a formal and inevitable state. We are told in the ancient scriptures, for example, that the angels remained with God in heaven, and that therefore the time shall come when man, because he fell upon nature and into nature, and went through experiences in nature, shall become greater than the angels. This greaterness is due to the experience of existence. This experience in which man, deprived temporarily by the obscuring power of matter of his birthright, becomes like the prodigal son, a wanderer on the face of the earth. How gradually he reclaims his heritage. How by a virtuous and personal effort he explores his own nature, discovering finally that the reason for his existence is that he shall discover himself. And that this discovery brings about a change in the relationship between archetype and the exterior experience of the person. Therefore, the revelation of the divine through the human results in the creation of the great psychic entity which we call the soul. And the soul, which is born, as we might say, amidst animals, is born weak and helpless as an infant out of the sea of mystery, its virgin mother. This experienced creature, this soul entity, is finally to become the real entity in the being. This soul is to attain victory over body. It is to become the living bridge between heaven and earth. It is to become the great reconciler of all opposites. It is the mysterious alchemical mercury by means of which all base metals shall ultimately be transformed into pure gold. Therefore, the archetype plus the objective experience of man equals the increasing wealth of the psychic life. the ultimate realization that man is a psychic being, not a physical being, and that the reorientation of himself upon the psychic level means the end of stress. It means then and then only that he shall be able to be compatible for the purpose of his own nature. Thus this crossing of spiritual and material value becomes for man an archetypal symbol of his proper state. It also becomes the archetypal symbol of the abuse by means of which he destroys through his ignorance, through his superstition, and through his fear. That he uses this symbol not as a symbol of addition, but as a symbol of punishment. And so we use it in our daily thinking. To us, experience is not opportunity, it is punishment. To us, pain is not privilege, it is punishment. To us, the fact that we must do certain things that we do not now want to do is not lawfulness, but punishment. The frustration of our ambition is punishment. Anything that prevents us from continuing the habits which we have generally developed becomes our symbol of limitation, restraint, punishment, martyrdom, death. Yet the purpose of the relationship of life to matter is not the purpose of death. It is the purpose of the creation of this symbol of resurrection and regeneration. This symbol by which the instrument of torment is transformed into the symbol of hope. Because it is this experience which we now reject, which is truly the stone which the builder rejected, and which must in time become the head of the corner. It is therefore our privilege and our right to transform the cross we carry from the symbol of punishment to the symbol of addition, to the symbol of that power by means of which we shall transform all things earthy into things which have in themselves a heavenly subsistence. But we shall find in the cross we bear the secret of the crown we seek. And while these archetypal symbols have been misused through the ages, it is strange how many of the old truisms come back again to us as we proceed to understand the story in its beauty and in its magnitude. Now we also know that at this season of the year, the mysterious rise of the Christian star and the journey of the wise men out of the east has peculiar archetypal symbolism for us. We wonder who these wise men may be and why they come to worship at the crib of the newborn symbol of life. The star, which is representative of also archetypal symbolism, occurs again in the psychological experiences of many persons. We, through a long association, have come to identify this brilliant star with the symbol of our salvation and our hope. But actually the star symbol existed in our consciousness long before that mysterious occurrence. The Pythagoreans in the 5th and 6th centuries before the beginning of the Christian era had a star of 5 points, which they called the pentalpha, inasmuch as it was composed of 5 characters for the Greek letter A, or alpha. The pentalpha was to Pythagoras the symbol of healing, the symbol of equilibrium, and the symbol of man. It was to him likewise a mathematical mystery, inasmuch as it contained within its mysterious formula the archetypal pattern of certain aspects of man's psychic existence. In the psychological theory, therefore, the breaking of a star, the appearance of a radiant point of light, was to the psychic, or to the psychologist of ancient times, who was then the psychic, was the symbol of the emergence of a conscious unit, In other words, a star or a symbol was the fundamental archetype of awareness. Just as the great laws impressed themselves upon man, perhaps through the archetype of the fish, so the dawn of a particular awareness was like a flash or a star or a spark within man. Consciousness was a spark. This spark was a star. This star was not the archetype of the universe moving in upon him. It was the dawning or awakening of his own unit of consciousness. Therefore, the star was the symbol of the dawn of the conscious entity in man. It was the symbol of an idea, the symbol of a basic value of which man suddenly attained awareness. It might therefore be a consummation of whatever experiences caused man to suddenly shine with understanding inside himself. The star was therefore, to a measure, the symbol of the archetype of the soul unit, the psychic self, which was gradually to come, and the promise of which was in the form of the star. Various explanations have been given for the three wise men and the gifts which they brought. I think in the 20th century our understanding of these wise men should be that man has three groups of attributes. These three groups of attributes are incidentally rather well personified by the three principal races of the earth. And from these races, according to the story and according to the complexion of these wise men, these sages originally came. Man has a series of powers, which of themselves may be tyrants, but which when brought together for the worship of the psychic unit can become the great servants of all things that are good. Man's primary contribution is therefore to our thinking physical, labor. Man brought in ancient times the fruits of the land which he had cultivated with his hands. He built, he struggled, he fought with his hands for the preservation of his kind. Therefore, the labors of our hands, our daily work, represent activity. And this physical activity represents one of the wise men. Our emotional activity has given us art and music. It has given us a great part of literature and poetry and drama. It has given us inspiration and religion. It has brought us all kinds of soul enrichment. And this, therefore, representing our emotional wealth, the emotional power within us to build, may be considered as one of the wise men. And the third of these is reason, the power of the mind itself, the intellect, by means of which we explore all nature and have sought to bring the unknown within the boundaries of the known. The mind, therefore, makes the offering of philosophy, of science, of innumerable attainments for us, and is a good and useful servant of this compound personality which is ourselves. Therefore, these three, the mind, the heart, and the hand, come and bow before the mystery of the birth of consciousness in man. It is this birth of consciousness which makes the heart, the mind, and the hand the servants of the self. Until this central consciousness demands and receives the homage of our intellect, our emotions, and our actions. These have a certain existence in themselves, and in this existence they may go into excess and extreme and even destroy us. Because if we reason without consciousness, we lose the basic value of reasoning and thinking. If our emotions are not lighted by the star in ourselves, they are selfish and negative. If our actions are not purposed by a divine archetypal plan within our natures, they labor in vain who seek to build. Thus, in the symbolism, the achievements of the outer life, represented by the three wise instruments, or servants, or purposes, or skills which we possess, come to offer themselves to our service, because they have seen the star in the east. They have seen the dawn of consciousness, and have realized that consciousness is their natural and proper ruler, and that each of them fulfills its labor properly only when it is moved by the archetype of life within ourselves. Thus they come willingly and dedicate themselves to the service of the eternal. We may not realize this experience in our daily living, but it is simpler than we know, and it happens to us and we never even sense the correlation or the parallel in the symbolism. An individual goes along working day by day, doing the things he's always done, in the way he has always done them. And then suddenly something happens to him. He has a little insight. He finds that he has a new understanding of something. Perhaps the door is opened in his consciousness, and there is a little more of wealth, a little more of depth in him. Almost instantly, the things he does take on new meaning. The individual who spent all his time selfishly doing unimportant things suddenly finds that there is a reason for what he is doing. So instead of using his skills just to achieve the old purposelessness, he suddenly finds that instinctively and without effort, he is making things for a purpose. I know a case of a man, for instance, who had a little craft shop in which he made all kinds of chairs, and dishes, and bowls, and cups, and things that nobody really wanted. He gave them to all his friends until his friends didn't want any more. It was his interest and his avocation. And suddenly he became very much interested in the Boy Scout movement. Here was an opportunity for service. Within a few weeks he had all those boys in his craft shop, and he was showing them how to make things and build things. And he had suddenly discovered a new reason for this craft shop, and a new use of his time, which was much more meaningful to him and was probably keeping young people off the street where they so easily got into difficulty. Suddenly, his new idea bound him to a new use of the things that he had. In other words, in him, a wise man had come to worship at the altar of a greater principle. In him, this skill now was apprenticed to a conception, a conviction, a belief, and new value was there. Thus, whenever we become more internally conscious, the things that we do become rededicated, and the heart, the mind, and the hand come to offer themselves to the eternal truth we have discovered. Thus these symbols go on archetypally working with us every day. The great archetype of Christmas as a festival, it seems to me, therefore, is one in which we seek meanings, seek to discover gentle and beautiful truths we have always known to be there. But we have made these truths too historical, we have bound them too much to other people, we have held them too tightly within the bonds of sects and creeds. We have not allowed them to become simple, gentle, happy experiences moving into our own lives. We have not applied them to our particular need at the moment, and found through this application a new symbolic wealth, a new concept of archetype, by which we are encouraged and strengthened to face the day with a better hope. If we bring all these things to bear upon our own lives, we shall then have not only a more beautiful Christmas, but strangely enough, we will have a very scientific Christmas. We will discover that all of these laws and principles are true. That they are true not by theological stand-alone, but they are true because they represent inevitable motions of our own hopes, our own beliefs, our own inward desire for beauty and truth and understanding and sympathy and friendship. And as we begin to work with these principles, we will rescue these sacred days from the comparatively superficial situation into which they have fallen, and we will realize why, in spite of their exploitation, we cling to them. We cling to them because we need them, and we cling to them because they make our hearts sing, even though we are not always consciously able to live the principles involved. And on that basis, I think we can all face Christmas with a greater degree of understanding and a determination to make it an experience within our own lives. If we do this, we shall really have a very Merry Christmas. And